This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. According to Brad Stone's Amazon Unbound, Jeff Bezos once told his Amazon Prime executive team, "I want my Game of Thrones." From this demand, two series came. One was Wheel of Time, the other was Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. We now know that Wheel of Time was certainly no Game of Thrones, and judging from the response to the trailers, it's not looking good for The Rings of Power either. Still, Jeff Bezos' instruction was pretty clear, and for Amazon, money is not an issue. So how could they fail at so simple an instruction? Twice. We shall see, for in this editorial, I will first go through why Jeff Bezos wanted a Game of Thrones of his own in the first place, how Amazon almost got one before their own internal policies got in the way and doomed both the Wheel of Time and the Rings of Power in the process. Before any of that though, all this epic fantasy makes me want to go on an epic quest. Which brings us neatly to this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. It may not be on the Sega Mega Drive, but it is easily available on iOS, Android and PC, where you should check it out, using either the on-screen QR code or the link in the description. Raid of course has the best heroes around, with more than 600 champions and counting from a variety of different factions. But today, let's talk villains. Orcs generally get a bad rap in fantasy, but in Raid they're not all bad. They do have a good reason to dislike humans though, as their lands were annexed, forcing most orc clans to become nomadic. Seeing a potential ally in Queen Eva of the Elves, they joined her cause. But allies sometimes have different motivations, and hers will only be revealed over the course of the campaign you must take the orcs on. And you have some unique and awesome ones to choose between, all with different abilities and from different tribes, indicated by their ornaments. Just check out Iron Brago, fearsomely clad in iron armor, and the more lithe barbarian, Nodgar the Headhunter. If you're not playing Raid already, now is the perfect time to get started. And if you click our link in the description or scan our QR code here on the screen, you'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free epic champion, Aina, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and an ancient shard, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in-game. All this treasure will be waiting for you right here. Do note, however, that this offer is only available for new players and only for the next 30 days. So use that QR code or click that link in the description now, and we'll see you in the game. And with that, let's get back to what Jeff Bezos initially wanted. In conjunction with the promotion surrounding the Rings of Power trailer, it was frequently claimed that Amazon founder Jeff Bezos was a super fan of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And I'm not necessarily saying that isn't true, but according to Brad Stone's Amazon Unbound, he never said, "I want my Lord of the Rings." No, what he reportedly told his team of executives was, "I want my Game of Thrones." And the tacit instruction derived from that was, "Go fetch me other established fantasy properties that can do for Amazon what Game of Thrones did for HBO." It's a sensible request. HBO's mega hit attracted tens of millions of viewers per episode by the end of its 8-season run, and it was seen as the leading force ushering in the era of peak TV. It showed that a fantasy drama based on books could achieve the holy grail of both critical and commercial success. And Bezos wanted that for his production company Amazon Studios and for his streaming service Prime Video. Now granted, creatively, Game of Thrones did not end on a high note, and we'll get back to that. But the extreme commercial success of the latter seasons was based on the extreme creative success of the early seasons, which was when showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss did near-literal adaptations of J.R.R. Martin's original books. You see, the books had already amassed a huge following. They were proven to be commercially successful. And in the early days, Benioff and Weiss didn't mess with that. They followed the story, almost to the letter. The biggest changes in the early days were simply minor alterations to fit the narrative in an episodic structure. But when the books were brutal and gory, so were the corresponding episodes, likewise with sex and nudity. The end result of this extreme fidelity to the source material was one of the greatest hits in TV history. No wonder Amazon wanted some of that. But they didn't merely want to compete in the fantasy TV market. No, they wanted to dominate it. To this end, they didn't want just one Game of Thrones, but 2 Game of Thrones. One that would conquer the family market, and this was obviously Lord of the Rings, the first series they locked down. But 2 executives felt they needed something to supplement that. Something with an even greater appeal to adult audiences. Something that could venture where Lord of the Rings couldn't, and feature all of the sex, nudity, violence, and intrigue that Game of Thrones did, and then some. So they went out and got Conan the Barbarian. Yes, I know I have a penchant for bringing up Conan, like I did in our recent analysis of The Batman, but it's seldom as relevant as now. For a while there, Amazon were developing both Lord of the Rings and a Conan the Barbarian series. The Conan series had an experienced showrunner in Ryan Condal of Colony fame. His planned take for the Conan series was pretty similar to what was done in the earlier seasons of Game of Thrones. Namely, faithfully adapt the original stories by Robert E. Howard, which incidentally served as one of the major inspirations behind Martin's Game of Thrones books, and like the comics, only write new connective tissue between the stories. According to everyone who read them, Condal's scripts were amazing, tense, sexy, brutal, and action-filled. Hence, Amazon ordered 2 seasons, with automatic renewals beyond that, provided certain criteria were met. It looked as though Amazon were really going to get their Game of Thrones. But then, something changed. The executives who had brought Conan to Amazon were Me Too'd and ousted from the company. In the aftermath of this, and in order to clean up both Amazon's culture and output, Jennifer Salk was brought in to run Amazon Studios. One of the first things she did was pull the plug on Conan the Barbarian, reportedly due to the inherent toxic masculinity, which the showrunner and Conan rights holder were stubbornly not interested in either toning down or walking back. Replacing Conan was Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time. Keep in mind, as we established earlier, one of the key reasons why Game of Thrones became the worldwide smash hit it did was because in the early seasons, the series was exceedingly true to the original books, which already had proven commercial success and a built-in audience. But at some point, some would argue as early as Season 4 or even Season 3, Game of Thrones started veering off the track. This was when the books started becoming more complex, meaning that deciding which parts of the books to adapt and how to adapt them became ever more challenging, perhaps too challenging for Benioff and Weiss, who started injecting ever more and more of their own creativity and reinterpretations into the material. And many a fan would argue they did so poorly. Things went completely off the rails when they ran out of published books and started working from Martin's story outlines from the unpublished books. This would be their greatest challenge as writers yet, but they blew it completely, as they by that point just wanted to end the series, so they could go work on a Star Wars trilogy instead. But in rushing Game of Thrones to an end, they reinterpreted it into something unrecognizable, disappointing everyone. Their reinterpretation was in fact so disappointing, it even cost them that Star Wars trilogy, which never happened. Alas, that very reinterpretation route they took in the latter seasons and episodes of Game of Thrones is what was done to the Wheel of Time from day one. Unlike Conan, The Wheel of Time didn't have a showrunner or corporate owner who would fight to protect the original vision of the dearly departed author. When the order went out to deconstruct the already female-led Wheel of Time into something outright female-centric, there were no one to challenge it, and first-time showrunner Rafe Judkins was only happy to carry the instruction out. The perhaps most egregious change is in the magic system ruling the world, which in Robert Jordan's books is divided in two equal halves, the masculine and the feminine, like yin and yang, ever in balance. In the Amazon series, it is just the one power, and you get no points for guessing which one was ditched. Also, Rand, the lead male character of the books, was massively changed and pushed into the background. The end result of this deconstruction and subversion of Robert Jordan's original work was that a large chunk of the built-in audience were frightfully disappointed and stopped watching. While Amazon does not publish viewership numbers, there are no secondary markers to indicate that the series is a big hit with general audiences either. Quite the contrary. The Wheel of Time is no Game of Thrones. It's almost as though having an inexperienced showrunner completely subvert and reinvent an earlier work that was already proven successful and has a following doesn't translate into success. Who could have foreseen something like that? Well, clearly not the Jennifer Salk-run Amazon Studios, because they're doing exactly that again on their Lord of the Rings. Rafe Judkins' most extensive earlier credits before becoming the Wheel of Time showrunner include writing 11 episodes of Chuck, 5 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and being a contestant in Season 11 of Survivor. However, this makes him a master of his craft when compared with Rings of Power showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, whose official earlier credits include exactly nothing. The only thing we know they worked on is the worst ever take on Star Trek IV, which never happened. Under their watch, The Lord of the Rings is also being reimagined and rewritten, among other things as more female-centric. But I stress among other things. As we've covered in other videos, there is nothing to indicate that respecting Tolkien's original work is even remotely a priority, just like respecting Robert Jordan's work was not a priority on the Wheel of Time. The contrast to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy couldn't be greater. Here's what he had to say at the time.
As filmmakers, as writers, we had no interest whatsoever in putting our junk, our baggage into these movies. We just thought we should take what Tolkien cared about clearly, we should take those and we should put them into the film. This should ultimately be Tolkien's film, it shouldn't be ours.
Also, by the time Peter Jackson actually made his trilogy, he had a few productions under his belt already and acquired the skills required to not just physically pull it off, but the intuition of what would work and what wouldn't. Most importantly, he championed not his own, but Tolkien's vision, and he made sure that he and producer Bob Shaye were in agreement about exactly which movies to make early on. You should incidentally check out our interview with movie mogul Bob Shaye if you haven't done so already. The end result of respecting the original work, having the experience to pull it off, and ensuring everyone was on the same page, is one of the greatest and most successful film trilogies of all time, which is near universally embraced by fans. The contrast between that and Amazon's Wheel of Time and Rings of Power could not be greater. In fact, the fan response to both the Rings of Power and the Wheel of Time has been so bad that several outlets in the entertainment media complex have written articles trying to obfuscate why. CBR, for instance, tries to claim that some fans were unhappy with the generic sets in Wheel of Time, but loved the storytelling, and that other fans are unhappy with the generic costumes in the Rings of Power, but remain super excited for the show. And that is one way to spot a paid-for puff piece. The real reason that neither the Wheel of Time nor the Rings of Power can ever be the Game of Thrones that Jeff Bezos originally wanted, however, is that neither are faithful adaptations of the stories that have proven commercial success and a built-in audience. What they have is the titles and the character names, but behind that are corporate products pushing approved corporate values. That does not a Game of Thrones make. Unless, of course, we're talking Season 8. Creatively, that's exactly what you'll get that way. Not commercially though, because the success of Game of Thrones was built on the early fidelity to the source material, which is something that neither The Wheel of Time nor The Rings of Power have going for them. How long do you think it will take before Amazon realizes this? Or do you think there is still any hope either of these can be the new Game of Thrones? Let me know in the comments. Before you go, remember, if you're new to Raid Shadow Legends, then use either the QR code on screen or the link in the description to collect your exclusive offer. It is only valid for 30 days though, so join in on the fun now.